Hello, welcome to the FilmGamer podcast, number 49, post-Oscars edition. Now, this is season 4, episode 15, and I had to do one because it's been too long, and I kind of wondered, was I going to continue? And I didn't feel comfortable not continuing without doing at least one more. Why did I stop? Well, every time that there's a change in my routine, like working or not working, it's a bit of a disruption. And another weekend went by, nothing too exciting at the box office. Another weekend went by, the Oscars just happened. And I really hadn't done one in a while since reviewing The Brutalist, which itself wasn't really much of an episode. So I kind of felt I should at least do 49, and now I'm thinking let me at least do number 50. I tried setting this up with my laptop and my nice microphone because I'm currently having my big computer connected to the big screen, so I don't have access to it to record a lot, and that's part of the reason why I haven't done, a complete setup, and I didn't want to go back to recording from my phone, which is what I'm doing now, because it felt backwards, and I feel you guys, all two of you listening, deserve the best quality. But we work with what we have. And my biggest problem has always been consistency. I really enjoy giving the best quality and know that I can, but I don't always deliver. So please forgive me. This is going to be an Oscars review episode, and I'll get over the boring stuff quite quickly. So going into the box office, this was another repeat weekend for Captain America: Brave New World at the box office. It's third week being number one, and what's impressive is that it doesn't look at all like a good movie, but because the way the amalgamation works in the movie industry now, there's not a whole lot of big movies that audiences can do. So this has been number one for the third weekend and makes $15 million. It costs an absurd amount of money. Like, it's something in the realm of, it's like 188 million, possibly more. Yeah, it's something that I remember somebody saying about the character of General Ross, who's played by Harrison Ford, and they were like, Harrison Ford is a legitimately good casting for General Ross, and General Ross is a good character, but this movie isn't going to do him justice or explore any of that. And I think how that's just kind of weird, that kind of potential. For the people who did see the movie, and I'll watch it when it's on Disney+, it's just mainly that Marvel is so beholden to its mythology at this point that it has no room to explore anything else. And the big hook in this new movie is just that they discover adamantium, which had been commented on because the giant celestial hand that comes out of the sea at the end of Eternals is made of adamantium. That was like so many movies ago in the Marvel series. But like, because of, this franchise, operating costs, if you want to call it that, the movie doesn't have any room to like explore who he is as a character. And if you're not familiar, General Ross, Thunderbolt Ross, as he's called, was first introduced in the movies in The Incredible Hulk in 2008, when The Incredible Hulk was played by Edward Norton, and General Ross was played by William Hurt, Academy Award winner William Hurt. And William Hurt passed away. The last time he played General Ross on screen was in the Black Widow movie. And he has since been replaced by Harrison Ford, who has done a lot of work with Disney. He did Call of the Wild right before the pandemic hit. And he did a good job, holding the screen in my opinion. And you don't get very many actors who can do that very late in their career. And then, as well, because Marvel or Disney took over Lucasfilm, they ended up distributing Indiana Jones. So he ended up working with them on Indiana Jones. And they also took over Lucasfilm for Star Wars, so he ended up in Star Wars. So he's done a lot of his career work with Disney now, and that's just kind of what he does. He also currently works with Paramount on 1923, which I'm watching week to week, and this season 2 of 2 is not very good. It's basically the second generation of the Dutton family. First generation was led by Tim McGraw in a really great miniseries, 1883, led by Sam Elliott. Good to watch on its own, good standalone series. And then they're into 1923, and it kind of gets into a plot of a guy on an African safari who we realize is part of this family and needs to get home to them. But the show loses its way along the way. You have Timothy Dalton, famous for playing Bond, and right before Pierce Brosnan, he's an evil guy, and every single scene he's in is like super evil. And then back at the ranch, there's Harrison Ford, being like a roughneck or whatever, walking around saying stuff, and it's just like there's nothing going on. So it's kind of a missed opportunity, but what else are you going to have Harrison Ford do? He's also plays a shrink on the show Shrinking, so he's got a lot going on, but overall it's impressive that he's co-leading a movie at this stage in his career, having been on top the whole time. Anthony Mackie is also billed as the first lead of the movie and taking over for Captain America, and I realize that the movie did make a lot of money, so they don't actually need to go back to Chris Evans having the movie flopped and stuff, but Sam Wilson as Captain America is kind of interesting, but doesn't really work on his own as a standalone character. So apparently the movie just has a lot of Incredible Hulk backstory follow-up stuff, because the Incredible Hulk was about General Ross, and it has a lot of baggage of that. One of the villains of the movie is the leader who was hinted at way back when in 2008 when the Incredible Hulk came out, and it's this kind of weird payoff to that story, which I'm interested in seeing. It's just that as Marvel goes along, they have just more and more baggage, I guess, is all I wanted to say, and so they have to pay that stuff off. And anyways, I'll watch it when it comes on Disney Plus, and I really wanted it to be good, but the director they got for this movie, this is what I meant to say, is not super experienced, and as the series goes on, the MCU that is, they get less and less experienced directors, and they hire more and more of their in-house writers with less experience, and so they think like, oh, well, it's us that's the formula, we'll just promote from within. And the first phase of Marvel had a lot of working directors, and the second and third phases they had a good mix of their own and then other professionals and stuff. And now they've just basically hired their own TV directors who've directed their TV shows, and it's just there's no distinct flavor to it at all. So I'll watch Captain America Brave New World when it comes out on streaming on Disney Plus, but I'm not really that interested in it. Same way I'm not really that interested in Daredevil Born Again. And as for this bizarre, I wouldn't call it a fight, but discussion of like, is the Netflix series of Marvel shows canon? Yes, they are. I don't know why this BS conversation started where people decided that Daredevil somehow wasn't canon because it was made for Netflix and not Disney, even though it was contracted under a Disney production deal. So it's just stupid. It's similar to how people talk about the lore surrounding Star Wars of like, does this count? Do the comic books count? Do the books count? It's like, in my opinion, no, they're movies, but the people who are deciding whether or not it's lore are the same people who make the decisions as to whether or not they are like acceptable lore. So it's like, who are these people arguing with but themselves? It's all stupid. And, if you ask me, a lot of this stuff just needs to be simplified and tell simple stories right in front of us. So back to the box office. Number two was a movie called Last Breath. This movie had an interesting trailer for it, but I didn't find that it communicated its premise very well at all. Something about people going down in a submarine and getting cut off for oxygen. I learned just by a quick peek at the documentary on which it is based that it's basically a guy who gets trapped on the ocean floor with 5 minutes of oxygen, but they can't reach him for 30 minutes. It's very Apollo 13-esque. And what they did was they got the director of the documentary to direct a live-action remake of it. And apparently the reviews are good. So I look forward to watching it when it's out. The Monkey is also there in its second week. It's distributed by Neon. The director, Oz Perkins, and them had good success with Long Legs last year, where that made a lot of money. This has made some money for them as well, so that's good. It's a profit deal because it only cost like $10 million at most, probably a bit less than that. It's based on a Stephen King short story about these two brothers when they were kids. There's a monkey that killed people, and it comes back, and so it's just basically like Final Destination with a monkey. I look forward to seeing it. I love horror. Number four is Paddington in Peru. Highly well-regarded series. Kids movie. I wasn't crazy about the first one, but the second one is supposed to be nothing short of brilliant, and this has good reviews as well. Number five is Dogman, Universal, DreamWorks animated movie. Well reviewed. I don't like the animation style. It looks cheap, but based on a series of children's novels, so they have IP. It's made $84 million domestically. Doing well for them. Hopefully the kids like it. Number six is Mufasa. Still hanging in there, still making money. That check must have moved mountains for Barry Jenkins. Because, this movie, can't say it's gotten good reviews. It uses the Godfather Part 2 structure of doing a wraparound of like sequel and prequel at the same time that Mamma Mia 2 also did. It made quite a bit less than the first movie, which was a juggernaut and did like $1.5 billion. This made less than half of that, but that still amounts to nearly $250 million domestic and $700 million worldwide. So it's a lot of money for them. Number seven is Hard Eyes. It is about two co-workers who I guess are confused for being a couple and are hunted by a Heart Eyes killer. It's from the director of Werewolves Within, which was a pretty good movie. And watching the trailer for Heart Eyes, I do not like Mason Gooding. Just because I don't like how they handled his character in the Scream movies. He's Cuba Gooding Jr.'s son. And he hasn't really impressed me with any of his acting. But I will say these Nepo babies, a couple of them like Jack Quaid and O'Shea Jackson Jr., they're all pretty good at judging material and reading and finding good material for themselves. They all genuinely, at this stage in their career compared to their parents, have made a lot of better decisions in terms of the creative projects they've been involved with, and Hard Eyes is another example of that. So good for Mason. I look forward to seeing Hard Eyes when it comes out. Has it made a lot of money? Not a lot really at all, but it looks good, and horror is always profitable because it's made so cheaply. It's easy to create fake blood, cheap thrills. Number 8 is The Unbreakable Boy, which is basically about a boy who has the unbreakable disease that Samuel L. Jackson has, where he has super brittle bones that break. I believe it is a, kind of religious movie, because the Lionsgate did it. They do a lot of religious movies. So, that serves an audience there. And then you have One of Them Days, which came out in January. I actually reviewed it or looked at it on the last episode. 47 million, nothing to sneeze at. Pretty good for a live action comedy, especially one that costs like in the 16 to 20 million range. Then you have Mobile Suit Gundam and a bunch of other movies. Riff Raff, which played at TIFF, premiered this weekend. Didn't do super well though. Per theater average of $897 in over 1,000 theaters for less than $1 million. Not the best. Any other milestones? No, not really. Complete Unknown, decent sized hit, but like I'd call it a single. Like in baseball, hits one base. It's made over 100 million. It's not like amazing or anything, but hey. And then a lot of the Academy Awards movies came out. But yeah, no major milestones for any of them, really. So that I'll leave the box office report for and move on to my last couple watched on letterboxd. So today I watched Nickel Boys because it was nominated for Best Picture. Thought it was brutal, and it made me wonder about this series of collections of movies that Amazon has released, where it's Nickel Boys, Till, the TV series, The Underground Railroad, and American Fiction as well. And they're all about, and in American Fiction's case, it's satirizing, but they're all about black trauma porn. And I just kind of find it weird that Amazon is the one to do that and cover that, because I don't know, there's something gross about a company known for being exploitative towards workers covering stories about human exploitation. I just find it in bad taste. Anyways, I saw Barton Fink, which I got through an interlibrary loan, and I thought it was weird. That's basically the takeaway. Coen brothers aren't usually my thing, but it was interesting nonetheless to watch. The Coen brothers made it while waiting on another film of theirs to get made. Before that, I watched Zola, which I watched on Pluto TV. Zola is based on a Twitter feed about a stripper who fell out with another stripper and stuff like that, but the movie is just kind of like nonsense from scene to scene. 4 good performances, though, from Taylor Page, Riley Keough, Coleman Domingo, who I think will be the next Denzel Washington, or is on his way to, with back-to-back acting nominations. And then I will also say the guy from Succession, who I can't think about. Let me Google his name. It's so hard to come up with something. Nicholas Braun. That's who it is. I knew his first name was Nicholas, but I couldn't remember. So, yeah, 4 good performances. Not much of a plot, though, but, movie's a movie. Business is business. Gotta move on. Speaking of which, Kraven the Hunter I watched, and that is a movie that feels like made out of obligation. Sony just sitting on IP and thinking, well, this is something that we have. Looks like we gotta make it. Hire a talented director, talented actors, but they don't have a story worth telling. But they make it out of obligation, and it does terribly. And it's just kind of a bummer, because Kraven is a cool character, a hunter who, hunts, but they make him into sort of an animal lover, and it's kind of the wrong way to go. And he's a villain. They try and make him into an anti-hero, and it doesn't work. Not much to say about the movie. It was just, waste of time, waste of everybody involved. I still had a lot to enjoy about it because it was still distinctive about its characters. I referred to it on my Letterboxd review as a well-directed piece of trash with interesting characters and a bad, boring story, resulting in the most boring outcome possible. I want to give it 3 stars for all the actors, but the movie lacks a reason to exist, and the action isn't that exciting aside from Kraven's escape from a Russian prison. the director J.C. Chandor ended up signing a deal with Sony to make a movie that he really did want. So the next movie from them hopefully will be good, and maybe he'll stick with Sony and they can have some sort of success. But anyways, moving backwards, September 5 is a movie that I saw, and I thought the screenplay for it was pretty good, but it's pretty apolitical. And it's funny that, no matter what, you can go on letterboxd and you'll see people complain. It's like, this was too political, they call it Jewish propaganda. And it's like, it's not Jewish propaganda. This actually happened to Jewish people, where a bunch of Israeli Olympians in Munich were kidnapped and murdered by a Palestinian group. That's just a historical fact. They often say in movies the choice not to be political is political. Everything in movies is political, but political in kind of a fascinating way. I always think it's worth noting how a movie chooses to say or cover historical events. It's interesting. What I think my philosophy is in regards to politics is, I'll take, for example, David Fincher. Pretty much everything he has to say in all of his movies is political in a way that I disagree with. Like, for example, in The killer chooses not to kill the guy who would have the most significant impact on the world. The person that, if he did kill them, it would probably do the most good in the world. But it doesn't, because not only has David Fincher always served corporate overlords, which is kind of the funny kickback of Fight Club that people don't realize about it. He's just such a skilled filmmaker that people don't notice. But the choice that the killer makes in that movie is that, hey, we all make mistakes. Nobody's perfect. Let it go. And live and be human. And that's great message, but it's like, okay, you have a killer who knows nothing but violence, and you choose to make the statement of him not to do the one thing that he's good at, or tries to be good at, that would make a difference in the world. Yeah. Interesting stuff. Moving backwards, I rewatched Rush Hour, which I should mark that as having seen that before. I don't know why I hadn't. Fast, funny movies. I joked this series is the best argument in favor of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it is the best example of the buddy movie that I can possibly think of, because you have two people who couldn't be more different. You have an Asian guy and a black LAPD cop, and one's an inspector, one's a cop. They both come together because in real life they're both musical. Jackie Chan has released actually a couple of albums in China, and Chris Tucker is of course musical. He's best friends with Michael Jackson, and on screen they unite in their pursuit of justice, to solve a kidnapping that happens during rush hour traffic. And it shows that in terms of diversity, equity, inclusion, that it's very hard to get two diverse people to work together. It's a nightmare getting around how they communicate and whatnot. But once they do, it's gold once you get them to get together. And I find, because I watched this as a kid, watching, Lethal Weapon, where it's a white guy and a black guy. That's not different enough for me after having seen Rush Hour. And it's not as funny as Rush Hour. So I'm watching it, it's I like Lethal Weapon, but it's not as funny as Rush Hour, It's just that, and the second movie are just very good. I watched Cujo, which I had on my DVR forever. That whole movie is just them in a car, stuck in a car, because the dog is there, waiting for their father to come back. There's some good subtext there that Stephen King wrote that I'm sure plays well on the page, but it's a failed opportunity as a movie. Then you have Stagecoach, which was on my list forever. Group of people traveling across dangerous, Indian territory in a stagecoach, right before a remake of some sort. Because you have all of these characters with mysterious pasts who all need to get to one place. Some great action directing there. And this is a movie from 1939, the year of Gone with the Wind and Wizard of Oz. So for it to hold up, it's pretty impressive. And then, I rewatched Heat, which I gave 4.5 stars. I watched it. I got it on 4K. No notes. What I did write about it is, if you're a highly disciplined master thief and one partner, played by Val Kilmer, who's a gambling addict, tells you, who's in piles of debt, the bank is worth the risk. It's like, dude, you're a gambling addict. And your other partner, who's a psychopath, played by Tom Sizemore, tells you that for him, the action is the juice. Why on earth would you continue and not walk out on them in 30 seconds flat when you spot the heat around the corner? Vincent Hanna, played by Robert De Niro, is a master thief who does what he does best, takes scores. And he knows that the police are onto them. So why would he do it? And I remember asking my dad this once, and he's like, well, depends on how confident you are. And, Neil McCauley, who's the thief, is a confident man. It's just that Vincent Hanna is better at his job. And that's really what I feel Heat is about. It's about two men who are good at their job, who are on opposing sides, and the one who wins is better. The problem is that, as Vincent Hanna says, his life is a disaster zone. And there's sort of a subtext there about men who are disciplined at their jobs, who basically, in order to be good at what they do, have to destroy everything around them. So, a lot to think about there. It's the highest rated movie. I gave 4 stars to Rush Hour, 4.5 stars to that I watched this month. And then, I watched Late Night with the Devil, which has a good first act, basically, and then kind of has nowhere to go. I watched The Gorge, which has a great midpoint where they jump into the gorge, and you're like, finally. And then you realize the gorge, which they're protecting, is the gates of hell, metaphorically, because realistically it looks like a Gears of War map. And so it's a watchable movie, but kind of sucks. The romantic angle of it is nice because it's like Anya Taylor-Joy on one side, Miles Teller on the other. They're not supposed to talk. They do talk. They end up getting to know each other romantically. There's no one else around. It's very similar to what I want my screenplay to be. I rewatched Anora. Gave that one a heart. It was my favorite movie out of the Oscar nominees. And then I'll get to more of that later. I just said a fun time that doesn't linger in your head as long as you wish it would. But I'll get to more Anora later in my Oscar chat. Back to the Future Part 2. I watched for the first time, gave it 2.5 stars. It ends on a cliffhanger, and it's not satisfying in its own story. They don't spend a lot of time going to the future, which is like the whole appeal of Part 2, or what it should be. So that's frustrating to me, because Robert Zemeckis is like, I'm not remaking Back to the Future, it's perfect. And then he's like, well, maybe I do a musical version of it. And it's like, you ask him in the behind the scenes, and he's like, yeah, I don't really like the future that much. I like the past. And it's like, Back to the Future, more than anything, is something that should be about the future. I, as a kid, always imagined what the future was like, would always want to travel to the future. And ironically, Back to the Future does not seem to get the appeal of that. Although the first one is really well done. I gave that one 4.5 stars, and it was my first time watching it all the way through. And, the moment when they're ready to go back to the future, and he can't get the car to start, was the first time when watching a movie in a long time where I'm like, oh no, like, how's Marty McFly gonna get out of this one? So, yeah, just really good screenplay, one of those movies where everything comes together. It's worth it. Unbroken, I'd been circling forever and watched, and it looks good, but 1.5 stars, because it's a and then type of movie where one thing happens and then another and then another, and it just doesn't mean anything. Rush Hour 2, I gave 4.5 stars. I'd seen it before. Really well edited movie, another one where everything comes together. It's the best buddy movie of all time. Great stunt work by Jackie Chan. Fights still funny despite the dated humor. It's edited perfectly. Lalo Griffin's score, who also did the theme to Mission Impossible, was great. The only downside is the script isn't strong, but all the actors are so good it's not really that noticeable. And then I watched Love and Friendship, which my mom accidentally rented from Hoopla. Man, was the quality terrible. It's very much outside my, comfort zone of the movies that I watch because it's a period piece of the Victorian era. Very Jane Austen-like. Well, it is an adaptation of a Jane Austen book. I wrote, it's nice to see something different, but I can't follow the plots of these Victorian era Austen movies, even with full attention. Good use of budget and well directed. The actors, it seems like they could have used more rehearsal time, but yeah, one of those happy tossed in for variety, but not my kind of thing. And then, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, gave it 3.5 stars. I wrote, great sound, score, lead character and concept, well-paced, extremely inventive, great execution. There's a lot of stylistic complexity mixed with a simple story. This is classic Spielberg, but I don't find its simple story so satisfying. The marital strife is interesting. The finale works extremely well, and the train tracks encounter and child abduction as well. But everything else is forgettable. That's okay, though. Richard Dreyfuss and Terry Garr's best performances. I also watched The Ritual Killer. That's like a 2-star movie that's just like serial killer. It's the kind of movie I would have made first out of film school if I had made it out of film school and been able to make a movie. Bulletproof concept of, hunting a serial killer and solid cast, but after a while you realize none of the scenes really connect. The killer himself isn't scary and just poorly cast. They really could have done something with the drinking of the main detective or connected the Italy scenes, which were the most entertaining, but too unconnected to the rest of the film. Also, the ending is very WTF and not in an entertaining way. A lesson that one could take from this is even if you have baseline competency in a film, you need to take a risk in story or in form in order to carve out your own identity. I watch a lot of movies, and I remember most of them, but you need to do something big or different or risky when making a movie, even if you don't succeed, because with the right real estate, you can still get it back on track. And at least you tried something different that made you stand out. I wouldn't recommend this movie to anyone. I doubt I will ever see it again. If you're not taking risks in a movie, what's the point? I also watched a movie that I gave 3 stars called Lead Me Home. It's just a 40-minute documentary about homelessness. Great footage, teaches empathy for the homeless. I wish it went a little deeper, but good for a short. And then I gave 2.5 stars to the Rennie Harlan film, The Misfits, which is just yet another heist movie, like the 1,000th heist movie ever done. A professionally done, watchably bad movie. The kind where you can't blame any of the actors or crew members participating because nobody needed work, because everybody needed work, and the audience had nothing better to do. I thought about turning it off midway through because nothing is happening, and at the end, still nothing happened. But Rennie Harlan's strength as a director, his only strength, is that he can keep things moving fast enough to make you not always question why you're watching a bad movie. I've seen 11 Harlan films, and thankfully, this is the speed of The Bricklayer and less misogynistic, and less the speed of his painful Strangers remake, which is awful. Strangers is an awful movie. The remake, that is. The first movie is torturous, but in a very old-fashioned, deliberate way. And, I already covered the second one recently, earlier on this podcast, so you can go back to that episode. I'll show up for Pierce Brosnan on a lot of stuff. Nick Cannon was annoying, but Jamie Chung took the hedge off. Tim Roth, I always wondered if he's a good actor, because he shows up in stuff like this. Considering this was an 11% on Rotten Tomatoes rated box office flop. It'd be hilarious to see these misfits turn up again, but I'll give it a neutral positive rating, even though I would not recommend it because it's smart enough not to set itself up for a sequel. Yes, when you watch a movie, I'm so glad when it's self-contained, tells the story beginning to end. Yeah. Superman, the Christopher Reeve story, which I saw. Kind of tired of these Wikipedia documentaries that are useless to everyone but those who know nothing of the subject. Kind of jumps all over the place, good interviews with the family, but it lacks depth and solidifies Christopher Reeve's status as the definitive Superman. And then closing out February, In a Violent Nature, gave it 3 stars. I get what it was doing. Could have been 20 minutes shorter. Slow-moving horror film, but it's super slow-moving. Like, you could have... I know it's 90 minutes, but they could have shortened it even more. It's cool that it's Canadian, though. That's cool. Yeah. I hate the way they set up these details, though, on letterboxd, because it's like, I want to know the running time of a movie, but it won't show me. I wanted to get specifically, but it's not worth it. And then, I rewatched the National Treasure movies, 4 stars for the first, 2.5 for the second. Daddy-O I rented from the library, and then Aliens, which I rewatched. And I saw Flight Risk in theaters, 2.5 stars, but kind of liked it. I like those kind of movies. The main actress, Michelle Dockery, was good, and I said, are we sure Marky Mark didn't just shave a bald cap? I didn't know his hairline was a widow's peak, but he has long hair for most of the time. Michelle Dockery has a badass American accent, true. Topher Grace, wish we'd see him more, also true. The movie tells its story fine, but this looks like a $2 million movie, and it cost $25 million. What the hell? I get $5 million, went to the cast with 4.5 for Wahlberg, but where's the rest? Like, the whole movie is them in a dodo play, and Mark is good, but his performance feels cut up, and he doesn't act much in it, like, he's in, 3 scenes. Mel's directing is good, but the script is missing a few funny things that could go wrong with the plane, and have fun with the space that they're playing in. I like it, but it's not great. And then Rambo Last Blood, which again I rewatched and forgot to mark as a rewatch. Corrected that. Saw it in theaters. It's the most basic story, played with rip-roaring efficiency. I love it. I don't care that people don't. Then, back to The Brutalist, which I gave 1.5 stars, which I'll bring back into... I'll also say The Searchers, 4 stars, lives up to the hype. Anyways, so, the Oscars. 37 minutes in. Okay, we're good. So, the Oscars were tonight. Kind of uneventful. Everybody who was nominated won, expected to win, with one key illuminating difference. So, if you're played the bookies or whatever, and you just played the odds, you'd come out with a pretty good night. Everybody was expected to win. The one guy... So, Best Picture went to Anora, and that movie was produced by Sean Baker. Sean Baker also directed, and won for directing. He also wrote the screenplay, and won for original screenplay. And he also edited the movie, and he had a funny joke of like, man, I saved this movie in the edit, which is a good speech to give, because the director edited the movie himself and considered it like it's a big part of his screenplay. And a big part of directing. So, yeah, the guy had a speech for directing when he won director, for how movies should be released in theaters and that it's important. He had a speech about editing, and he had a speech about... he didn't have a speech about producing. But anyways, this guy won 4 Oscars in one night by himself. He didn't do it completely himself, but it's amazing. And I'm happy that Anora won, because that was the movie I waited 7.5 hours in line for, because I knew it was going to be special. And it turned out to be special, and kind of validates my love for movies. and again, was my favorite out of all the movies nominated. The other movies nominated were The Brutalist, which I gave 1.5 stars, Complete Unknown, which I never really had any interest in seeing. I'll watch it when it's on Disney Plus, but don't care for it. It's a down the line biopic. Timothy Chalamet said in his SAG Award speech of like, this could have been wrote. Everybody gave it their A game and elevated it a bit, but it's still a musical biopic. So I'm happy Timothy Chalamet didn't win for playing a boring musical real life person. But yeah, it's annoying to me just that Timothy Chalamet is a pretty good actor and he could have won, but it's like the Academy going like, now, young man, you wait your turn. And it's like, men have to be old to win Oscars for Best Actor, and women have to be super young, which is the plot of The Substance. The Substance, which, by the way, another movie I waited in line for, the last movie I ended up seeing at TIFF, Demi Moore was the lead actor favorite, and ended up losing to a much younger actress, Mikey Madison, who's 25. And, no complaint, Mikey Madison is good in Anora, but it is damning that, the young actress wins and they don't award the older actress. And the older actor, in this case Adrian Brody, wins for The Brutalist, and protecting his own record of being the youngest person ever to win Best Actor, because if Timothy Chalamet had won, then Timothy Chalamet would break Adrian Brody's record. So Adrian Brody weirdly had to win to defend himself. And the other thing that I saw was Halle Berry came back. She was invited she introduced the James Bond tribute, and she met Adrian Brody really for like the second time ever on the red carpet tonight. The first time they met was when he kissed her, when he won Best Actor, and she's like, I had to get him back, ha ha ha. And I weirdly wonder about, like, did she make peace of it or something? It's this weird thing. And somebody said, Gen Z doesn't get it. The early 2000s were a more innocent time. Back when Adrian Brody won Best Actor, everyone else nominated in that category had won an Oscar before, aside from Adrian Brody. And Adrian Brody wins. He's overcome with emotion. He comes up on stage and kisses Halle Berry on the mouth. And she's just kind of like, what the F is going on? She was asked about it later on in interviews, and she's like, yeah, what'd you think of that? What's the deal there? Was that rehearsed? Was it? And she's like, it was definitely not rehearsed. And she's like, I didn't know what was going on, so I was just going with it. And so I wonder if, 22 years later, when they're both at the Oscars again together, was her coming up to him and kissing him kind of the only play that she had, and she's like making peace with it or whatever. I know it's like a ridiculous thing to think about. Really, it is something that I saw in a very romantic light when I remember seeing it happen on TV. And because if you watch his original speech, he is overcome with emotion, and he does talk for a long period of time, but he does say stuff that's meaningful. Like, if you watch his first Best Actor speech, he gives a speech about wanting the conflict that's going on in Iraq during the Bush administration, wanting it to come to a speedy resolution quickly so that we can all come home. And now, 22 years later, he's playing another Holocaust survivor, and he gives another long-running speech, and again plays off the band who starts to play him off, and he's like, no, I've done this before, and that's like a kind of funny, meaningful callback. But he rambles on for like a really long time and says nothing coherent. He struggles to talk about how, when I won Best Actor the first time, I was amazed and didn't really appreciate what it was like to be back up here. And my career was almost over, and I have greater appreciation now. And then he kind of rambled on more and more, trying to. It's that thing when you're up there and you're facing everybody and you're like, I'm blowing it right now, and you've got nothing to say. And you try and find the words to dig yourself out and say something meaningful. But he kind of failed to. And Sean Baker won Best Director right after him and said something really meaningful. And what's funny is Brady Corbett was staring angrily at Adrian Brody, which is not the face you make when you're the actor of your movie won, Best Actor. And The Brutalist ended up winning 3 Academy Awards. The other one was for cinematography by Lowell Crawley, and best score by Daniel Blumberg, and it does have the best score of the da 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 da, so really the best result that movie could have hoped for, because revealed not to be very good. So I've covered Best Actor, Best Actress, Best Director. Great speech by Sean Baker that movies deserve to be, in theaters, and we can come together in the dark, and even if we disagree politically, we can have something in common and enjoy a shared experience. Conan O'Brien joked that the reason Anora won so many awards is because Americans really wanted to see someone stand up to a Russian, which was a funny joke. But it mostly steered away from obvious brain-dead politics as a ceremony, thankfully. There was talk that Kamala Harris would show up to the Oscars, and I'm like, oh, God, no. Please, no. Because I hate it when, it's okay to be political, but to be polemic and, polarizing is not something I wanted to see. A movie that won Best Documentary, which is interesting, is a movie about a sort of no man's land between between Israel and Palestine. It's called No Other Land, I think. Let me see what it's actually called. No Other Land, yep. And it's just basically made by a Palestinian Israel collective of 4 activists, and what they describe as an active resistance on the path to justice during the ongoing conflict in the region. This movie does not have distribution in the United States, but ended up winning Best Documentary. That is something. So impressive to that Israelis and Palestinians can come together to create a movie, because that's really what I would do if I wanted to have progress in solving the conflict, because movies bring people together. Whether you liked it or hated it, you can both discuss it. You're creating a common ground. I haven't spoken about Conclave, a movie I've watched sort of twice, once in theaters and then rewatched a bit of it on streaming while my dad was watching it, and it's a solid movie. Ended up winning for adaptive screenplay, which we all knew it would win. It's a very well-written screenplay. The guy who wrote it was previously nominated for writing Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, which is a boring but very organized movie, so, it's a +1 for structure. And then Dune Part 2 won for sound and special effects. Deserved. In both cases, they cut off one of the winners. In special effects, the one guy didn't get to talk, and then in sound, another guy didn't get to talk. Although Denis Villeneuve got thanked, which is nice. He got thanked in both speeches, which is nice to see. Emilia Perez won supporting actress for Zoe Saldana, which was, deserved. I joked when I watched it of hey, the Academy realizes if they award Zoe Saldana, they don't have to watch Emilia Perez or any of the rest of it. And it ended up winning for Best Original Song as well. And I forget the third one, because it lost Best International Feature to I'm Still Here, which is about couple that goes on vacation and the husband gets kidnapped. It's supposed to be pretty good. It is Best Picture nominee, so there you go. And then Nickel Boys, which I watched today. Man, did this movie suck. I did not like it at all. I gave it a half star and wrote that it was the latest in a long line of products like American Fiction, Till, and Underground Railroad, reminding you of the importance of black traumatic pain. I get that these stories are important reminders of how far we have not come from massive crimes against human decency. And I understand every year there's a gimmick movie that breaks through, and this is the outcome of both those. I just wish it wouldn't come from a company that's famous for worker exploitation. The movie was boring, tedious, and didn't illuminate anything I didn't already know about residential schools. It probably works better in novel form because this movie was a struggle. The Substance, which I mentioned, very well-directed movie. Didn't realize it was as long as it was until I was reviewing it. And then Wicked, which was produced by one guy, Mark Platt. That's a good example of like blockbuster filmmaking, everything coming together, everybody doing everything highest level. Still haven't seen it though, because it hasn't shown up on video. And the big complaint I have for movies at the Oscars is like, these movies should be available to watch by the time the Oscars come out. Everybody should have an opportunity to watch them. And I wasn't able to watch Wicked because it wasn't available to rent. And it was released at the end of November, so December, January, February. Should have been available to rent by the end of February. It was available to purchase in a store. You can go and purchase it in a store now, but you can't rent it for $6.95. How messed up is that? You know, movies, studios have too much control. You know, we had Perfect. We were able to rent something when it came out on video. And now, for whatever reason, you can't. It's frustrating to me. But anyways, what haven't I covered? Kieran Culkin won for Real Pain. The only time Anora didn't win was for a supporting actor. Everybody likes Kieran Culkin. And the reason he won, aside from giving good speeches and just being a genuinely charming guy, is, as somebody pointed out, that Hollywood votes for or endorses the way it would like to see itself. Kieran Culkin is a child actor. His parents took advantage of him as a child, which a lot of successful child actors sort of have to have, because you have to have parents who push you and basically do your job for you. In his Oscar-winning speech, Kieran Culkin gave thanks to his parents for, sadly, mostly trying to do a good job raising him and sort of turning out as a success. And so him winning sends the message of Hollywood of, see, you can be a child actor and survive. You know, Ke Huy Quan is the same deal. And it's like, yeah, you might get exploited as a child, but it's okay if you win an Oscar. You know, and that's sort of why he won over, you know, Jeremy Strong or Guy Pearce or Edward Norton or Yura Borisov. Hollywood votes for the reflection of how it would like to see itself, which is why Mikey Madison won over Demi Moore. Although, you know, they've voted for Frances McDormand before, you know, and she's older. So, you know, there's an argument against it, not to be cynical. Zoe Saldana, she's like a good actor, but like, man, her role on Special Ops Lioness I watch on TV is rough. Like, because Taylor Sheridan is writing, has to play the character basically as a complete bitch. And what's annoying to me is that it's almost like she sort of gets typecast, because she was, you know, a relatively reasonable person as Uhura in Star Trek, and is Neytiri in Avatar. And then in Avatar 2, she's like really mean and kind of evil. And then on Special Ops Lioness, she's just a bitch all the time. So it's kind of unfortunate that like somebody who has been in such blockbuster sci-fi movies, Gamora, and Guardians of the Galaxy, um, she's good there too. But it's just kind of like had to make her meaner, and she was never going to get nominated for like actual movies that people watch for those blockbusters. So she had to like go and do a movie from a French filmmaker, that takes place in Mexico, and is in a foreign language that, most people can't understand, so that they could see her as like exotic, and that's how she could win. And the Oscars could give themselves some illusion of depth for picking a person to win because they're being progressive and, have depth, but really it's highlighting just how shallow they are. Um, yeah, best animated feature film. Wikipedia actually mistakenly highlighted the wrong winner here because Flow won. A movie made on Blender, which is open source software, and it's from Latvia. Conan O'Brien made a joke like, yes, Latvia has thrown down the gauntlet. This is the first Academy Award won from anybody in Latvia. So he's like, your move, Estonia. And he made that joke twice. But there's no dialogue spoken in Flow, so it's a foreign language, but communicates through the visual medium of cinema to reach across the aisles and hearts and end up winning animated feature. Some people online were disappointed the Wild Robot didn't win. Hey, I was excited to see the Wild Robot. Watched the trailer, thought it looked great. Finally saw the movie. It was very much like WALL-E. It was like a clone of it. So I'm happy that another movie won. I still need to see I'm Still Here. Documentary short, The Only Girl in the Orchestra. Not sure what it's about, but it's available on Netflix. So, like most documentary shorts, and it ends up winning if people can see it on Netflix. In the Shadow of Cypress won best animated film, and it's from Iran, animated short film. I'm sure it's great. And then I Am Not a Robot won live action short. That film follows Laura, who, after a series of failed CAPTCHA tests plus into a strange new reality, plunges into a strange new reality. It reminds me, with these CAPTCHA tests of like, we're proving to robots that we are not robots, and that's kind of ridiculous. So yeah, Emilia Perez winning Best Original Song. Jacques Audiard, the director, being credited on that song and winning, but not getting to say anything is kind of funny to me because it's a movie that kind of says nothing. It's just like a fearless, French artist made a movie. He's never really made a movie of his that I liked, but he makes a movie based on his understanding of what Spanish-speaking country like Mexico could be, and of course makes a movie about cartels and crimes and stuff. And when asked if he did any research, he's like, nope. But that's art. It's fearless. A lot of people really hate Emilia Perez because of that. It's built on cliche, and it's offensive to the people of Mexico, and it basically takes its identity away from it. But at the end of the day, it's a movie that no one really cares about, and no one will really care about after. The only person who cares about it is, the people who won Oscars for it. But, it's Netflix spending a lot of money again to, make a movie that wins some awards and isn't thought of afterwards. Jacques Audiard has made quite a few films. I find that he broke through with A Prophet movie, which people thought was amazing, and, won a lot of awards. But it's about an imprisoned petty criminal of Algerian origin who rises in the prison hierarchy. I didn't think it was that great or lived up to its reputation. I did like Rust and Bone, which tells the story of a nightclub bouncer who falls in love with a woman who trains killer whales and loses her leg in a workplace accident. It That's my favorite movie of his. It's all right. Um, he made The Sisters Brothers, which I thought was a poor adaptation of what is a really well-regarded novel. But, the best artists, because this guy was nominated for Best Director, push. Like, what if I made a movie in Spanish? Okay, I'll go and make it. I don't speak a lick of Spanish or know anything about the culture, but I'll just go and make it. And he made it. People responded to it. And, yeah, people moved on. And then, um, Wicked won Best Production Design. Nathan Crowley is the guy who won for that category. Nathan Crowley used to work with Christopher Nolan. The one time he didn't work with him, of course, they ended up winning the Production Design Award. And then he was unable to do work on Inception. And the people who ended up working on that film ended up winning the Academy Award. So he missed out on the Christopher Nolan train. So I was happy that he finally won, because if you look at the special features of Tenet, Nathan Crowley was like the only guy aside from Ludwig Göransson, the composer, who knew what he was doing on that movie. So happy to see him win. And he thanks John M. Chu, who did Step Up to the Streets and G.I. Joe 2. And Step Up 3 and stuff, and Crazy Rich Asians. So he's a pretty decent director, but does blockbuster stuff. But nonetheless was able to carry Wicked to a couple of Oscar wins. And, Substance wins Best Makeup, so it doesn't go home empty-handed. And, yeah, so overall, okay, kind of forgettable night. I'm gonna have to change my background to something. Maybe I'll change my phone background to Indiana Jones, and because at the end of this month it comes out on PlayStation, so maybe I'll get a PlayStation to myself as a gift, if I can find one for a decent price, and then can have fun and start playing. But I need to beat Cyberpunk 2077 first. Yes, so I have Cyberpunk on my desktop. I've played through quite a bit. I feel I'm getting close to the ending because I had a boss fight of like a bodyguard and stuff. I'm kind of not following the story a whole lot. It's all over the place. The writing isn't very good. It's cringe. I don't play games that have writing that's this bad to a noticeable degree much. So it's a bit of a change of pace for me. The shooting mechanics still aren't that great. And I'm stuck on this boss fight where, of course, the boss's health recharges and the guy is invisible and he runs around and hides if you take too much health off of him. And I'm like, there must be some way that this guy, can be beaten. So let me, look it up like I usually do. And I go around, and the solution is this guy sucks. This fight is broken. They've never patched it. And you basically just have to spam and get lucky and hope that he glitches into the floor or something, and that's how you win. And I'm like, man, that seals it. Cyberpunk 2077 is a bad game. But it is engaging enough for me to play, and a lot of people do like multiple playthroughs and stuff. But it's one game where I still don't feel like I'm learning to do it properly. Like, I want to, none of my weapons feel effective, so I just spam the double barrel shotgun on everything. It doesn't feel as rich or intuitive as the Deus Ex games, which are also cyberpunk styled, were. I think I'll go in and I'll play Mankind Divided after this, just to see. But it's like this problem of like when I start a game, I have the very strong desire to want to finish it, and I don't like starting games and then having to finish them. And playing games on my computer is just tedious. Now, I've made it that way because I insist on recording every piece of gameplay that I do. And because of that, I make it very tedious for myself. And as a result, I play less video games. But, it's something I gotta work out. And I'd like to work out this stuff before I find my next job. Because it's just, I'm a completionist. And the weirdest thing about me is just that I have a list of games and stuff that I want to complete weirdly before I feel I can move on in life. Before I can sell my screenplay, before I can do that. But, maybe life will take over. I don't know. I should pray about it. So, yeah, that's what I'm doing. So, in my life, just a personal update. Got a job a few months ago. I didn't like it that much, but I figured I'd settle in. And I didn't. I didn't settle in. I thought if I showed up and worked hard that I could get by, and I couldn't. And that was like a really weird thing to get my head around. I still kind of am boggled about it, but, I didn't continue at that place. And so I got another job of being extra. And I love being extra. So I was an extra for a local production that Universal made, the John Wayne Gacy story. It's a television show. And reminded me of how much I love acting, even though it's just background work and I wish I could get more. Really, I should just move to a place and just start doing random auditions. Or maybe I should pour my money into the Backstage website and stuff and see if I can get more work. Yeah, I enjoyed it. I was super nervous because now I get nervous about everything the night before. And the night before I go to sleep, I was able to sleep. And I get up and it's covered in snow. I drive to Richardson Stadium and get on the shuttle. I was worried I'd miss it. And I go there and I sit down, a group of people, and it's funny because I'm herded by bus into the Kingston Pen, which I'd been to one time before, where I watched Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? And in the courtyard. And here I am dressed up as a prisoner. And I do my rounds a couple of times. I sit around and we're herded to this secondary place where we wait. And it was a pretty organized shoot. On all these big productions, it always feels like, because every single person who is there is getting paid, so it feels like there's a lot of expense, It definitely cost more than $6 million, which is what Anora cost. And that movie cost $6 million, employed 40 people, and they shot in New York on location. That's very cool. That's very thrifty. And so that was cool. This probably cost that, not per episode, but I would say it cost $24 million. For an 8-episode series. That makes sense to me. That's just ballparking, completely pulling out of my ass those numbers. But seeing the makeup on the main guy, I thought was really cool. And just show, wow, those people really knew what they were doing. And I got to sort of interview some people of just hey, what's it like working in the industry? And you always run into, the jaded lifer who's I can't effing do this anymore. This is effing bullshit. And she was just kind of talking about how she hated coming down to Canada and that Canada wasn't going to be able to compete, which is, some sobering news. And just how, Netflix talked about buying a warehouse and what came of it? Nothing, And in New York, they have everything. In Atlanta, they have everything. Tyler Perry Studios in Atlanta in Pinewood Studios, it's like you can go complete your workday, and then at 2:30 in the morning have a 24-hour grocery store where you can just go in and get everything you need on your way home, and you can work around the clock. And how Canada needs to do that, because right now people work and shoot all of the rom-coms in the valley, in the Ottawa Valley, and Hot Frosty was shot in Brockville, and the Canadian government and people don't invest in it and think, oh, well, they'll still come no matter what. And she says they won't. And so I was kind of like, oh, this is interesting to hear feedback on that. And she's telling me while she's doing up my costume and adjusting me and that kind of thing. And then it's like, okay, we're ready for you. Do the mark and walk around the spire. And it's like, am I even going to be on screen? But it doesn't matter because I'm getting paid. Got paid minimum wage, and that kind of sucked because I'm like, oh, I was hoping they'd pay a little bit more. My pay stub did not say my rate on it right away. Like, I got emailed my stub, and it's like, yeah, here's your... Barely even showed the hours, and that kind of sucked. Because it's like, okay, well, what do I do? And I knew I wasn't going to get stiffed, and then I got my pay stub in the mail, and got a check, and I deposited my check and stuff like that. But I had to, mention to them in the comments when they said, hey, congrats, here's your pay stub. I'm like, just to let you know, the minimum wage is $17.20 an hour. So, and I felt like I was, poorly negotiating my rate. But I had no leverage, so whatever. But I'd do it again. I'd love it. I'd love to work again as an actor. The thing that bothers me is during my screenplay, which I finished, by the way, the 5th draft of. Still need to do more. The screenwriting work is never done. I usually do about 13 revisions, at least when I do a review. Hopefully I won't have to do that much, but, I'd love to act, although I've sort of aged out of the movie that I'm writing. Maybe I could rewrite it in this angle and play myself somehow. But yeah, I'd like to write, I'd like to direct, I'd like to star. I wouldn't mind being cinematography, but I don't know enough about it, so I'd, please let some expert do that. But yeah, it was a nice little treat doing that. And then, my other love, politics. I got to work wasn't being employed by Elections Ontario as a deputy returning officer tech, where it's just basically you come up, you scan people into a database. If they're not scanned, you add them to the database and tell them how to vote. And it was simple and straightforward. The training was good, which I was glad about. I'll have to add that to my resumes. And yeah, my neighbor showed up to the voting booths and was like, hey, you finally got a job, which I'm like, hey, you're still kind of an asshole. No, not kind of. Because it's like I've had a job for several months. I guess you didn't notice, and it's like I had extra work and I did this, but you just didn't see it. And those aren't the people you have to prove yourself for, so that's fine. Somebody even said to me after, hey, that guy's funny, he's not that bad, eh? He's a good guy, eh? And I'm just kind of like, yeah, well, not gonna totally embarrass him now, am I? I thought that would be something if I'm like, this guy is shit, but there are times to be spiteful, and I always play it by ear. I'm less spiteful now as I get older because I don't want to offend people. But man, I look back on the times when I didn't give a shit as a kid. Like one time this hardworking filmmaker came His name was Peter Lynch, and he did like a documentary on a guy who was like suffered a bear attack and then created a bear suit, like a real life Iron Man suit, to try and go hunt that bear down again. And it was kind of ridiculous. But I was asked what I thought of the movie. I remember when we screened it at my high school, and I'm like, I didn't like it. And people were like, "Oh, really?" And he like put the microphone in my face, thinking I'd be embarrassed to say what I thought, and I just completely shredded the movie apart. And afterwards, the filmmaker came out and spoke to my brother, not knowing it was my brother, and he's like, "Oh, F that one guy for like saying your movie sucked, eh?" And then the filmmaker was actually like, "Well, actually, it's good because, you know, you want that feedback of your movies, and everybody is always like kind of so nice. It's not very helpful. So it was nice when somebody like not connected, you know, gives you your feedback." And I imagine as a filmmaker, like Sidney Lumet would always say, you know, when the friends and family screening comes, that's brutal because those are the people who are close to you, don't care what you think, and they're not intimidated by you, so they'll really give it to you. But you know, I'm always so sensitive to what people think and wanting to be nice and that kind of thing as I get older, and I realize that a lot of times you being nice isn't super useful to people. Now, you being truthful also might be not useful. Like, somebody might not actually, like, the idea that people just ask you, you know, in order to be polite is very bothersome to me. Like, I hate it when somebody asks you, like, "Hey, how you doing?" That kind of thing, just to be polite and isn't really interested, because I always really want to say, you know, what's the point if we're not being real with each other? But, you know, I try and balance the world's expectation of me and that kind of thing, but I'd really like to be honest and straightforward. You know, kids see the world as it really is, and as we grow up, we kind of grow out of that and grow out of being truthful a bit. And I don't know, it's like I want to go back and find it, but it's too late. It's like I'm trying to swim towards the bottom as I'm running out of air. Will I be back? Will I do an episode 50? I'll promise to you this, that I'll do one. I'll do one more, even if it's the end of my podcast. Just because I feel like I'm running out of meaningful things to say. And I do want to move on. And, you know, I do want to have meaningful things to say, but I also don't want to waste your time. So I'll leave it there. A relatively short podcast compared to my several hours worth, but shows I'm being efficient. So next time, season 4, episode 50, episode 16 of season 4, and yeah, we'll talk all about, you know, box office, maybe Mickey 17. We'll talk about the other movies that I've seen recently, if there are an update. If I went another week and didn't watch a movie, that would be something. You know, I guess the funniest thing to me was just about how I got Barton Fink through an interlibrary loan and like waited a month or longer. No, I ordered it in November, and basically I watch it and then watch it, you know, 2 hours before I have to take my mom to a friend's place who's going to the airport, who's going on a trip. Shout out to my mom in the Dominican Republic right now. Home of Zoe Saldana. And you know, it's like I watch a movie and then go somewhere else. And this was a movie that I waited months for, put in months for. Movies really are the one hard-working thing that I can do in the background. Like, I can do it at 4 in the morning and 11. So I got to figure out a way to do that. Can I do that and still uphold my, interests of, blogging, reporting, politicking? Because there's no way I can keep doing this for the rest of my life. And I kind of hope not. But, opportunity knocks. I mean, I did get another opportunity to get paid as a photographer. And so I'm in discussions with somebody on that. And one last thing I will say, because I picked up another thing, was I've started working out. And I worked out in November, and I work out 3 days a week now. And the funny thing is, I haven't noticed too much of a difference in my lifestyle as I thought I would. Like, my legs don't atrophy as much anymore, which is nice. But yeah, it was like, I thought I'd get like a massive, defined, chiseled six pack, and I haven't gotten that. I thought I'd be able to have really strong arms, and they're tighter, but they're not necessarily stronger. And, I have a routine that I do and work on stuff and work on my legs and arms and stuff. But, yeah, still haven't seen really the results that I do. So I might have to step it up and work out even more. But until then, take care, and thanks for listening to the FilmGamer podcast, FilmGamer production. And hopefully, next time I'll have a bit of progress on my screenplay. I'll have a bit of progress on my photography. Maybe a bit of progress on my political career. And a bit of progress on, my filmmaking career in video games. So, thanks again for listening. And see you at the movies.